I'm in the game. I'm in the game. Hello, I'm in the video with my daddy.
What's going on, everybody? So today we are going to have Mark from Montana. He's a YouTube guy. I want to say he's on Instagram too, but we're going to find that out in the interview. And he travels around the Pacific Northwest. So we're going to kind of get into that a little bit. Hopefully you guys learn something as much as I do. And here we go. How's it going today, Mark?
Well, good morning. Good morning to you, Josh.
Yeah, it's still, it ain't afternoon yet.
It just crossed into afternoon for me here in Montana.
Oh, that's awesome. So you're out of the Montana area.
Right. Yeah. I'm in the capital.
Yeah. So does that explain the name, or you just kind of just went with it, right?
Well, come on, I mean, I'm old enough to remember the Marlboro Man. It's a cool name. I mean, Mark is my first name. But yeah, I mean, it's a cool place. And I grew up here, and I moved, I always wanted to go see the big world. So I moved when I went off to college in the Midwest and then to grad school on the East Coast. And I ended up working in, of all places, but I kind of knew it might happen, New York City. And then for over a decade in the Far East, and then back to the East Coast. But about 20 years ago, I moved back to Montana. I never thought that would happen, but it did. And I stayed there and got remarried. And it turned out that both my wife and I have relatives who migrated out to the Pacific Northwest, out to the Portland, Oregon area, and in my wife's case, also not to the Pacific, but to the Bay Area. She's got a daughter in the Oakland area. And so we had that in common. And that led to, well, we've had, both of us have had a connection to both Montana and the Pacific Northwest for decades. Well, for me, all my life, just about all my life. And for Christina, she moved to Montana 30 years ago, and about 10 years later, her kids were leaving to, out of the nest, and they chose the Pacific Northwest. And here we find ourselves decades later. We meet, we get married, and so that involves a lot of travel. We have homes both in Helena, my wife and I, and now just recently in Redmond, Oregon. And I know you're from, I mean, you know where all of these places are in Oregon. And my wife took a contract job. She's a advanced practice registered nurse. So she took a job that was a 90-day job as a visiting nurse last year. And of course, it turned into a offer of full employment, which we weren't expecting and didn't feel but we said, well, why not? We'll stay. So yeah, that's what's happening. So we're on the road a lot.
So one of the big questions I have is, what's the hobby scene like in Montana? Because
with all, and I'm sure I might hear from somebody who said he doesn't know, if I don't know what I'm talking about, I admit, but I'm going to guess it's not, it's social media based. I'm not aware, in terms of, I'm going to say if we're talking static models now, model shows, people whether they're building cars, tanks, airplanes, ships. I don't have a sense that there's a lot of in-person stuff of that happening on. We've got 1 million people in this state spread over a state bigger, almost as large as California. So it's pretty wide open. There are no urban centers that anybody in a big state would consider to be urban. There could be modeling clubs. I don't know. I mean, when I was, I grew up in little towns, so, modeling was something you did because that's what kids did back then. But, the idea that there was a modeling scene with clubs, there, I don't know, maybe there is, maybe there's one in Missoula or Bozeman, but I kind of tend to doubt it. I don't believe there are more than a handful, if that many, of sort of the large scale, dedicated, really cool hobby shops, independent hobby shops anymore. Those are hard to find in a lot of places. There weren't ever very many in Montana anyway. There was one in the town I moved to in Montana. It was called Wheaton Cycle and Toy. And today it's just Wheaton Cycle. The toy part, the hobby part is long gone. So.
Okay. Well, I mean, because you never really, at least I don't, being in, Pacific Northwest, you don't really hear of much out of Montana. Usually it's Oregon, Washington, and then they skip Montana and go to the next state over.
Yeah, I don't think we're like North Dakota or South Dakota or Nebraska, where those states are called flyover states. People don't even, touch down there. People touch down in Montana, but my impression is they touch down here to go skiing in the wintertime and to go hiking and backpacking in the summertime. I may be being very broad strokes here.
Hunting too, right?
And hunting. Oh, that's right. Hunting in the fall. Fishing in the summertime. A river runs through it. And hunting. Yeah, hunting season is started. In the fall through early winter.
So now I'm going to switch it. The same question to the Redmond area. I know there's a hobby shop in Bend, I believe.
There should be.
I've never heard of anything in Redmond. Is there anything over there? Or
haven't been there long enough to tell you. We just closed on our place a month and a half ago. We're still we've got enough stuff that when we go there, we can stay there, but we're still acquiring stuff. I have not moved any of my modeling stuff from either Helena, Montana, or Portland, Oregon down to Redmond. But Bend is only 16 miles away. So
yeah. I know there's a little bit of a presence in Bend. I didn't know if there was anything in Redmond or not, but Redmond's getting to be a pretty destination town over there too now.
It's pretty cool. 37,000 people. There were less than 10,000 people in 1960. In 2000, I looked all this stuff up. There were only about 20,000. So it's gone from 20,000 to 37,000 in the last 20 years. But the nice thing is it doesn't look, they did a really good job of making sure that the roads and the infrastructure, it works. I've been in places where it grew rapidly, and because it was a cool place to live, and suddenly people are just really upset because they can't get from there to the grocery store in 3 minutes. It now takes 15 because traffic is clogged up, we're really pleased with what we see in Redmond. Yeah.
No, that's really, really cool. And I know you haven't probably been in Oregon a long time, but how do you like the modeling scene in Oregon? Because there's one group that I like, and the rest are kind of, hit and miss, right?
Well, I should be clear. I don't participate in any local modeling groups in any state. All of the stuff I do is online. So I'm not saying that there might, if there are good groups, that's great. But I have found that I get enough of a connection in terms of the folks I want to be involved with, in terms of sharing stuff and information online through YouTube. And then I have formed some really strong friendships over the decades, even before I was really doing YouTube. a decade before I got back into static modeling, I got back into scratch slot car building. And that was not really a YouTube stuff. I mean, there is stuff out there, but it's pretty scarce compared to what you see for static modeling. But there's still a very active group of folks, and that's international. And so that's who I interact with. You know, I'm doing a ton of, well, I did a ton of slot car stuff until I got the bug that I needed to build some Aurora model airplanes again. And then I've moved over to static models almost exclusively the last 2 years. But I've still got my slot cars, my 1/32 scale scratch built slot cars. So.
No, that's awesome. And that's a trend that's kind of coming back.
Yeah, I don't think it's coming back. I mean, you know, it's changed in the dynamics. When I was a kid, my children said, "God, Dad, if we hear you say that one more time." but it was the heyday of home racing sets, and the vast majority were HO. They weren't really but what slot car called HO, not what train people called HO. And in Aurora moved really. Static models was maybe 1/4 of the Aurora Model Company's business in the early, and HO, it just blew. And then what you had was the whole commercial scene that happened in America starting in the mid 60s. And that was a boom and a bust within the space of 5 years. And that happened to be the period when I was late grade school, junior high. And then by the time I got to high school, the commercial scene had collapsed. And by that point, when you're in high school, there are more important cars to play around with than little cars like this. There's real cars, because you can go on a date with a real car, you know. So, but slot cars have come back. But as I understand it, in terms of sales or revenues, it's that 1/43 scale. Which I never got because that wasn't a scale for anything but die-cast when I was a kid. But it's a real popular scale now for home sets. The 1/24 racing is really confined to a few places in America. There probably are 5% of the places that were open in the 60s. The number of places, it probably isn't even 5%. It's, you know, now in Europe, in the UK, club slot car is still a pretty big thing, because I think they would contend, the Brits, that they invented it there. I'm not going to dispute it. I think that really does date earlier than anything that was done in the US with Scalextrics and Airfix, Hornby. And there's a lot of folks, and of course they're sort of my demographic. They're older folks, because they were the kids of the 50s and the 60s. And they stuck with it. So you have big slot car shows and expositions in Europe. I can't believe there'd be more than 1 or 2 of those in the United States now.
And it's interesting to kind of see, because you can kind of see it starting to come back, because, you know, like my generation was the last to kind of have that in stores, and we're starting to get it back out again, you know?
Yeah. But I mean, I don't know. I mean, I'm just not cognizant, because I haven't been in a Walmart's in years. And, but I imagine in the toy section of Walmart's, they've got the Scalextrics sets and stuff like that, the home sets. And, you know, I think still, like has always been the case, lots of sales at Christmas season. I don't know how much of that sticks. I really don't. My kids are long grown up. I tried to get my son involved in slot cars, and he wasn't interested. But he really was getting into fantasy wargaming stuff and Dungeons and Dragons and Magic: The Gathering, and that led to painting little miniatures. And that was fine by me, because I thought that was fantastic. So I started doing that with him, you know.
Oh, that's awesome. So let's get into some of that, right? Because you
Sure.
do figures,
Yeah.
military stuff, right? And what's the
Yeah.
other thing you do? Your tanks,
Well,
right?
well,
Is that
well, yeah. I mean, when I like a lot of people of my generation, and I'm pretty sure I'm a good decade older than you at least. But anyway, of our generations, I
I
think.
look
Hmm?
I look 65, but I'm only 43. Okay.
Oh, then I'm 2 decades older than you. Yeah. I was going to guess that you were maybe in your 50s. Okay, so okay.
No.
But when I was a kid, I built pretty much whatever the store had to sell. So, if it was a PT boat, I built a PT boat. If it was a hot rod that was there, that would look kind of cool on the shelf, I bought that. And I bought, I started out, I wanted military airplanes, and I got those. I tried to predominate, but I did a little bit of everything. But when I got back into the hobby and said, man, I want to get back into building static models, it was like, I'm going to build the set of Aurora World War One fighter planes, Great War fighter planes. They probably produced about 15 or 16 of those kits, plus about another 6 or 7 that were two-seaters from the late 50s to the mid 60s. And so I had about 5 or 6 of them as a kid. Put them together in an afternoon, no painting, thick tube of thick glue, Revell cement, slap on some decals, sort of, done. And I said, nah, you know what? I remember those being kind of pretty decent little planes, kind of fun. I want to get the whole collection. And this time I'm going to paint them right. And I'll probably have to get some aftermarket decals because I don't think the decals sitting in a box for 60 years may hold up. And so I started on that project. And I have a real love for history, and the Great War is a very significant turning point in modern history, and so it has a fascination for me. So I started with the Auroras, and then I moved into the more modern manufacturers who didn't exist until decades later, like Edmunds, Eduard, not Edmunds, Eduard, the Czech company. And they were making these great kits, the same ones, but much higher quality, much more complex. So I started building those. And then I went up, smaller scale to 1/72nd with Revell kits and Roden kits. And then crossing the big bridge to 1/32nd scale for aircraft, it was Wingnut Wings, which Sir Peter Jackson's company for about a decade. Unfortunately, I discovered all about that company about 4 or 5 months after they actually closed shop. So my acquisition of Wingnut Wings kits it costs a pretty penny for incredible kits that are no longer available and being actively, being produced. It's all through people who bought them and said, well, I'm going to buy these and hold on to them and sell them at 3 times the price or whatever. So yeah, I do. Right now, my collection of static models that I've got as an adult is almost exclusively Great War airplanes. Is what I'm doing in a variety of skills.
Now, is that I've looked at your Instagram page, so
Yeah.
you're mostly doing biplanes, or are you doing modern jets too? Modern military.
Haven't done a modern jet. I bought a Mirage, and let's see, it is it's an Eduard Mirage kit. It looks great looking plane. I haven't built it. I have built. I've got a P-38 Lightning, my favorite World War II American fighter. I've got that waiting to be built, the Tamiya kit. But I did build a Wildcat Tamiya, and I bought the Eduard F4F Grumman Wildcat. But so yes, biplanes, triplanes, so.
And you have a couple,
Biplanes.
you're going to show. Here,
Yeah.
check this
Yeah.
out.
There we go. So
I like the
this-
detail you put in those.
I'm sorry.
I like the detail you put in those.
Yeah, this is a Edward kit, and they are really finely crafted, exquisitely, exquisite. They're really top quality models, and if you build them per the instructions and have got some ability to paint, about the only thing you have to add is getting the rigging in, and some people say, "Man, I can't believe you do rigging." And if they're tank builders, I say to them, "Man, I can't believe you can put treads on those things." Everybody has their the Rubicon they don't cross. But for me, rigging is not an issue. So, and here's another one. This again is this is not an Aurora. This is an Edward.
Is that the Red Baron one?
Yeah, this is the red. This is the Fokker DR1. And
Okay.
the one thing, my only beef with Edward kits is almost none of them come with pilot figures. And I've got a real strong position on that. I know it's fantasy, but these planes don't fly themselves. How does a plane fly without a pilot? Why doesn't a kit have a pilot figure? So I have in all of my kits aftermarket pilots, and I'm not sure we can pick that up. I've got pictures of these on my Instagram page, and
And you can see it in there. It's just not.
Yeah, it's not. Yeah, it's probably not razor sharp. But so all of these pilots were pilots that I bought, made by a variety of different small craft manufacturers and stuff. And then it's like working to get them into the cockpit. But I spend a lot of time on all of that stuff.
So where are you getting the figures from?
The figures, let's see. Many of the producers are small Eastern European companies. And the other one that's really big are Korean. There's a bunch of small companies, and the country of origin is South Korea. So now that's for 1/48th and 1/72nd scale. For 1/32nd scale, as far as I'm concerned, the big three figures are Aviotic, which is in the UK, Copper State Models, which is in Latvia, and Model Cellar as in CELLAR, basement, Model Cellar, out of somewhere, I think Pennsylvania. And all of those folks, small shops, have engaged some of the highest quality sculptors out there to produce just amazing resin figures. And I buy those figures. Oftentimes I have to kit bash them because usually they're standing figures. I mean, this size. And I was like, no, I got to put them in the cockpit. So I've got to convert them to being now Aviotic and Copper State Models make a whole slew, a number of pilots that are specifically built for 1/32nd scale wingnut wings kits or Roden kits. And so those fit just perfectly with very little adjustment, So that's where I get those figures from. And of course, I haven't bought any of those figures in any hobby shop. Those are all online purchases.
Yeah, no, I kind of figured that. That's why I wanted to ask that, because those are some unique scales, and I figured you have a good hookup there. So how do you like the wingnut wings compared to some of the other ones?
Wingnut wings are there's nobody in wingnut wings class when it comes to that genre of model. There was nobody that was even close to them in terms of World War I aircraft in 1/32nd scale. It was, now granted, it was pretty limited. There were a lot of people making World War I airplanes, a fair number, not like World War II or jets, but there were still a lot of companies all of the usual players. But Rodin, Rodin is Ukrainian, and they had moved into 132nd. But Wingnut Wings is a level that is only matched by Copper State Models out of Latvia. Their kits are as good. They don't make as well. They're still in business. Wingnut Wings closed up in 2012. I mean, sorry, 2000. That's wrong. 2020. They closed their doors. So 2 years ago. But they're, the instruction booklets are collector's pieces. They're like having something to put on your library shelf about everything you want to know about the Fokker triplane. Just look at this beautiful color glossy brochure, which is also the instructions. Just high quality. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think there's a company that was actually creating the kits. I think they're still doing it just with a different box. I think.
Well, it did happen.
That internet stuff, you don't know if you can believe or not, right?
Wingnut Wings folded. It did not fold because of COVID.
Yep.
It folded because it had never made money. And while Sir Peter Jackson is extraordinarily wealthy, he finally decided enough's enough. And he had run into some business issues with a related company. And so he shut this thing down. Now, some of the designers and artisans, the company was based in New Zealand, Wingnut Wings, but the production was done in China. A couple of the designs were sold off to other companies, and some of the designers of Wingnut Wings have launched a startup new company called, Kotari or something like that, which is a Maori word for I don't know what. I'd have to go look it up. But their first release has still not come onto the market. It's going to be a Spitfire. And now, two of the models that Wingnut Wings was working on, their first release was going to be the Avro Lancaster, the big 4-engine, Merlin-engined British World War II bomber, heavy bomber. Mm-hmm. That was sold to a Chinese company. I think it's called Border Models and has been released. So Border Models picked up on that and did release it. And the other one that was released was sort of passed over, and it wasn't, and then was never sold as a Wingnut Wings kit, was the Fokker triplane. And that was done by also a Chinese company called Meng, M-E-N-G. And so the designs were probably the initial designs of both of those, I'm presuming were done by the artists in New Zealand, but the production and now the ownership of those particular models is in with Chinese companies. The Qatari is a phoenix rising to be but they still don't have their first model out yet. You can pre-order one on their website. So if you want another Spitfire.
Right. So you do paint figures.
Yeah.
So what'd you start out with other than little miniatures, or did you go bigger miniatures?
Let's see. What I started out with was painting figures was just a fun. Well, actually, what I started out with, I'll get this. What I started with slot car, scratch building slot cars. So bear with me. I'll get something.
Okay.
I'm going to have to step away. It's in a crystal box, or one of those things. I got to open it up here. We don't want to have an accident.
No,
I don't want to have an accident.
I already do enough accidents on this these shows.
All right. See if I can get this thing open. Well, I don't know here.
Oh, wow. Look at those.
All right. I'm hoping, since the reflection's still big, we're going to try. This box fits on very snugly. Got it. All right. All right, here we go.
Oh, here we go.
Okay, I dropped something there. I better find it before I step on it. Bet you never had this happen before in a live stream. Okay.
No,
all right.
I will tell you what happened to me.
All right. So,
And
go ahead.
so the big robot in the corner,
Yeah.
I was showing one of the guys at the end, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I dropped the whole bottom half of the thing in it. It's PLA, so it just shattered.
Oh boy.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, you asked me what I started out in figure painting. Well, it predated the static models, and I was building these 1/32 scratch built slot cars. Okay,
Yeah.
you can't buy. No company makes this car. I mean, this is not a ready to race car. This is all components that you buy and craft. And so what I was practicing my hand at was painting up these driver figures that go into the slot cars. That, by the way, is Jim Clark, world champion Formula One for 1963 and 65.
Oh, okay. That's cool.
And then here we go. BRM down there, tucked in because he is a little guy, Jackie Stewart. You can barely see him because Jackie Stewart's only about 5'5" in real life. So he's barely peeking over the windscreen there.
You mean the steering wheel?
The steering wheel, yeah. Here we have, you can find pictures of these guys up close. I think some of them on my Instagram page. This is Graham Hill or Errol Flynn, Clark Gable, the F1 driver who looked like a Hollywood lead because of his pencil-thin mustache. Graham Hill, English driver in his BRM. So that's what I started out with those. And then I moved to, when I got back into static modeling, was I've got to paint pilots. So now it was going down to the 1/48th scale. And then just to sort of try to really improve my technique, the sort of close to 1/48th scale in terms of military modeling is what they call 28 millimeter figures. You know, I mean, they use all these different conventions, as you know, for miniatures. So
yeah, that's 28 millimeter.
Yeah. So I said, I really want to get good at this stuff. The way I think you get good is you watch YouTube channels and see what the really good people are doing. And then you practice. So these are, I've got a whole bunch, these are 28 millimeter British Hussars. These are actually white metal figures,
Okay.
So I've got a squad of those, but the vast majority, my stockpile, okay. Let's see.
Is that Fonzie? Is that what that was?
We're going to give you a test, Josh. You know who this is?
Oh, that's Maverick.
That's Maverick. Yeah, that's Maverick in 1/48th scale. And I like this guy so much that I said, when I looked at him, when I look at him at tabletop distance, I go, boy, Mark, you did a really good job on this. But when I look at him at Instagram pictures, I said, oh, I can fix him. So I was basically going to strip the paint off the face. I was happy with the rest of it, but I'm going to repaint that little face. Well, it's resin, and I got a little clumsy and I chipped his nose. So, tabletop, nobody's going to notice. Instagram, it shows. So, so the company that makes this, Korean company, also makes it in 1/32. So of course I bought one in 1/32. And that one, picture of that one's on my Instagram page. So now this is what leads to escalation though. So, you build these things. So what's missing now? We've got the Kawasaki, we've got Maverick. We've got to get his jet, right? The Tomcat, the F-14. So I've got a 1/48 scale Tomcat in my stash, and I've got a 1/32 scale Tomcat in my stash. And let me tell you, a 1/32 scale F-14 is big, really big. I haven't built it yet, but someday. Then the question in the negotiation will be with my wife about how much space I'll need to display it. So,
Yeah, that'll be a big kit.
yeah,
So,
big kit.
so what are you using to paint some of the figures with? What paint line?
I'm a big fan for figures. I use usually a lot of Vallejo acrylics, and probably the second most popular line I use are AK Interactive acrylics. I use for my, I use a variety. I've got a bunch of others, Scale 75. I have Army Painter. I did all of these. I did all of these guys in Army Painter. It was the first big box of different paints I bought. Now for the airplanes, I would say that the majority of my aircraft are painted either with Vallejo acrylics, combination of airbrush or brush paint for detailing, and Tamiya. And Tamiya is, what do I want to call, alcohol-based acrylic as opposed to the true water-based acrylic.
Right. So how do you like the Army Painter stuff to the other?
A lot of people, you're not going to be terribly unique if you trash Army Painter, because a lot of people do trash Army Painter. It's good for, it's fine. It's the real thing about Army Painter, is you have to get the consistency right. And so it is thicker. You have to dilute it down much more for brush painting. I'll tell you this, I would not put Army Painter in my airbrush. I'm not going to even deal with that, and it's glossier. But the glossy stuff, you use a matte finish at the end, a matte clear varnish. You can get rid of that. Now, these guys, I didn't really bother to do that. So they're a lot shinier than what I'd like, but they're okay. But these are Army Painter, but I would say that, they're not of the same quality that I guess figure painters they wouldn't put them in the same class as Vallejo or AK.
See, I've got the big box. I've got the 50 or 60 box set, and then I've gone and got some of the other metallics. I like the metallic set out of that.
Mm-hmm.
It's just mind-boggling to me that's how people kind of just trash Army Painter.
Yeah, you do. Yeah, and I see there's a question there. It popped up on my screen. Ever try Citadel? Well, that's Games Workshop. I think Citadel might have the biggest line of acrylics out there. Well, Citadel and Vallejo probably have the biggest line and range of acrylics. And there's nothing wrong with Citadel paints, except I don't like the containers they come in. I like the drop. So I don't buy them. I've already got 300 bottles of paint. I'm not going to start buying, sorry, Games Workshop, I'm not going to start buying Citadel paints because I don't like to deal with their containers. And there's nothing that Citadel does that I can't get in Vallejo or AK. But are Citadel paints as good as, of course they are, yeah. And some people like, I guess, what do they call those, pots,
Yeah.
But
I just can't stand the pot either, so I understand that one.
Yeah, I mean,
it is good paint though.
Yeah, they're good paints. Yeah, they're very good paints. Yeah.
So, what are some of your unique tools that you like using doing the hobby?
Unique.
I say unique, but it's, you can just say whatever.
Well, I mean the must-haves. Well, unless you really want to work, if you want to make your life easy as a model maker, have a good, some people say, hell, a straight or what do you want to call it? An X-Acto knife. You can use that to remove pieces from a tree or a sprue. Well, they're a lot more adept with scalpels than I am. I want a good pair of sprue cutters, So, I think it's worthwhile to have. Yeah, I'm willing to pay for a quality. That makes life easy. I think for painting, the really, really good painters, the people who win awards, who enter competitions, who have thousands and thousands of people, who get talked about in the world of painting. They could paint with a Q-tip, and their stuff would look better, and than what I do. But if you want to up your game, a good quality brushes, and for those, yeah, sable hair brushes are better than what do they call the synthetic brushes. So I tend to buy nice sable hair brushes. Airbrushes, I think airbrushes is the tool that most hobbyists love to hate, or hate to love to hate. I mean, it's a love-hate relationship. They're a wonderful tool, but boy, they are temperamental little beasts. I am an advocate that if you can get one that is of higher quality, you should get the best one that you can afford and not feel bad about having spent the money on it. Because generally speaking, you're going to love it more, not because it's sprayed 50% better in terms of what it did on the model. But believe me, in terms of the cleanup and the maintenance, it's going to make your life a whole lot easier. So, I started with I just waited and waited and waited on air. And I finally said, okay, I'm getting, the Iwata airbrushes and Eclipse. It's a good medium quality airbrush. But about a year into that, even then it was like, yeah, this is a good airbrush, and you take care of it. It'll be pretty nice to you, but it's still a little temperamental. I grew up and worked on a ranch, and airbrushes are they're thoroughbreds. They're high strung. You love them, you can race them, but they get temperamental. Now, so I got a year into the airbrushing, I got a Harder and Steenbeck airbrush, and boy, I don't regret that at all. And that's the German company. And, I mean, people have their Badgers, and they have and then other people say, the pros, the guy on Airbrush Asylum that runs that channel, he could paint airbrushing better just blowing out of a rubber hose than I can. But the top quality stuff, I think that's worth it. So those are sort of the tools, I think. Get a good airbrush that's the best you can afford. Clippers, good set of sprue clippers will make your life easy. And if you care about your painting, whether it's figures or detailing, get some nice sable brushes. You can use the synthetic for the base stuff. Don't use your good quality to, brush paint on primer. Well, usually primer, rattle can, but the big detail. But for detailing, a sable brush really makes a difference, in my opinion.
What brand of sable brushes do you use?
Oh, there are a bunch of really good ones. Da Vinci, Raphael, Winsor and Newton are the ones I use. And recently, and this was because Vince Venturella, a very noted miniature painter, has got a great channel. He did a little review of Monarch Pro sable brushes about a month ago. And I immediately Googled that and bought a couple sets, and I love them.
Yeah, I saw that too.
Yeah.
He's
Did I say Monarch? Monument Pro. I did that also when I talked about him on my channel. You know, I said, I don't know, I had Monarch on the mind, you know, Monument Pro. So that's my newest sable brushes, and I love them.
Yeah, yeah, it's crazy how many different types of just paintbrushes there are, right?
Oh yeah. Not as many, you know. Yeah, and you can get lost in paint. You can get lost in the stuff, right? In the gear. Yeah,
Right.
yeah.
So, and other than that, that's about basic tools that you use, right?
Well, I use a lot more. Good quality needle nose tweezers. You know, I don't know. It's kind of funny. I think, when it comes to holding a paintbrush, I think I'm pretty much tremor free. I always could draw, so I can freehand. I've got a really steady hand when it comes to painting. You put a little piece of plastic that I've got to get from point A to point B with a pair of tweezers, and I don't know, it must be a brain thing. I can't do it. It's like, so good tweezers are important. Yeah, I struggle with that. So, I watch, when I watch people do build videos, and I really appreciate the build videos where somebody in a build video shows some of the outtakes, where they show the darn piece flying away. Because I'm sick and tired. I'm not, but I'm watching people and they're dropping in 1/3 of a millimeter size pieces with a tiny dab of either model cement or CA glue perfectly into the right place. And I go, what the hell? That never happens to me. How do they do that?
That was like take 10, right?
Well, that's fine, but I love it. I love it. Yeah. Do you know the guy? Have you watched A4 Garage, the Korean builder, the South Korean who builds? Have you seen that channel?
I think I know which channel you're talking about. Yeah, I think I've seen it.
The perfect car builds. He does. What would it be? Usually, they would be 1/24th or 1/25th scale automobiles, and they're exquisite. And his ability to craft stuff, because he'll take a Tamiya kit, which is a good model to start out with, but then to quote Plasmo, because the guy from Korea never talks. He just does it and he puts up, some titles on. But as Plasmo would say, he makes some minor modifications. Well, this guy is making minor modifications all over the place. But every once in a while, the guy from A4 Garage will show an outtake where even for him, something went flying. And it makes me feel a little better,
Yeah, true. Yeah. So what are some of the channels that you watch on YouTube?
Among the really, because, there are levels. I feel there are levels. There's a pantheon. In my view, there's a pantheon group of model makers out there. Let's see if I can do this without missing. Of course, I'll miss some because I don't know where. But the pantheon people, Plasmo, who is pretty sure Czechia, Czech Republic, Night Shift, Slovakia, the tank and armored guy, A4 Garage. I don't even know the guy's name. He's from South Korea. Tom Gregat, Tom's Modeling in Motion, which is a guy who builds everything. He builds shit. He does every type of model
Yeah.
And then he does it and wraps it around beautiful stop motion videos. So it's like, I can't believe he built this. I can't believe he constructed a 15, 20-minute video of stop motion, which makes it look like the invisible, like it just built itself, you know.
I'll have to check that one out. That one's
So for me, cars, modern sport automobiles, A4 Garage. For general purpose, a little bit of everything. Plasmo. This is me, my opinion. For military vehicles, especially tanks, Night Shift. And then I've got, of course, my heroes who do great war, you know, and there are about 4 or 5 of them. I listed them in one of the videos that I put out. I did sort of a shout out and said, these are guys that if I could get to be 1/10 or quarter as good as they are, I'd be a happy camper. Flying circus models out of Canada. Kit O'Double out of France. Pine Nico out of Japan. And I'm missing, there's a bunch of others, but their work is so good, you know. It's really good stuff. Now I watch, you know, now in terms of the one, you know, the people I interact with, you know, I mean, with the Great War creators, I interact with them. You know, we haven't ever met. We're worlds apart, but you know, we exchange comments, emails, etc. You know,
Yeah.
but I don't comment on Plasmo's channel or Night Shift's channel. They've got, you know, Night Shift. I don't know. Does he have 100? I mean, they've got tens of thousands of followers. They're wonderful. I like to see what they do, but I sort of follow a lot of folks who have small channels, and it's actually you know, Josh, it's personality based for me. It's not, you know, I watch some channels for guys who pretty much make American cars. Now, I haven't built American cars since I was 12, 13 years old, you know, models. And when I got back into slot car, I didn't do American cars. I did British Formula One cars. But I like these guys' channels. I like what they say. I like the way they interact with stuff. And the same goes. It's really a function of what they're talking about and what they're looking at and stuff like that.
Are you following any figure painter channels?
Yes, that's a good. Yes. I really got that down to one. I mean, there's a ton of them and I watched a lot of them, but now the person I follow is Alex out of Sweden, 52 miniatures.
Yes.
And he's amazing. And I follow him. I love his work. I love his creativity. I love his sense of humor. I love what he does. I love the broad range of interests that he has. I'm a supporter of him on Patreon. You know, I do that. I get on Discord. I chat. Yeah, Alex. And there are tons of others that I watch. I do watch John Ninnis, who I started to watch because of Miniac, his good friend. John and Scott.
I like both of
out
them.
of Minnesota. Yeah, they're fun. Yeah. But you know, but look, I know I'm retired, so in theory, I could keep my butt in my workroom for a good part of the day every day. But there's only so many hours in the day, so you know, at least you know, or maybe my attention span is only so long. So I've got to I sort of, you know, he goes through waves. So there are people that I used to follow, and it wasn't like I got bored with them, but it's like, no, you know, things shift. You move to somebody else. So,
No, I mean that's really cool. I was kind of curious on the figure ones just because of some of the figures I've seen on your
Mhm.
YouTube channel and your Instagram
Mhm.
that I knew you were following some pretty unique people
Mhm.
because some of those look really, really good.
Yeah, they're really, really good. Those guys are really, really good. Yeah, yeah,
So,
yeah, yeah. I
um,
mean, there's, but I'm always, I follow. I don't know. It's kind of funny because I follow a lot of modelers. I'm going to sort of say this is more the aircraft or military vehicle ones. And they do things in terms of whether it's weathering or detailing that's, really, really high caliber. And yet they go, oh, I don't do figures. I wouldn't know how to do that. And I just think, yeah, you would. All you have to do is sit down and start doing it. And within the space of a couple of months, you'd be painting amazing figures. If they can do what they're doing, they can paint figures. They go, oh, yours figures. Well, my figures look okay. They're pretty good. But they didn't. They looked pretty crappy 2 years ago. I kept my old ones. But and the goal is to try and improve all the time. I think that's the best way to get better. I think far more than watching a real pro do it. A real pro can keep you from making some stupid mistakes, more in the sense of spending money that you don't need to spend. But the best way, in my view, you get better is you just keep practicing, and you're willing to experiment. You're willing to try something different. I came up with a certain set way how I'm going to paint a face, and I was going to say, okay, I'm always going to use this formula, this paint.
uh-oh, he's freezing up. Oh no. All right, well, we'll give Mark a second. But man, okay. So just for a couple minutes, I'm going to show a couple of the things I've been working on and things that are going to be coming up. I printed out a bunch of this stuff. Hey, you back,
Wow.
Mark?
Now I see it. We were gone for a while. I just got the black
Yeah.
circle. Yeah. Yeah.
It happens,
Yeah.
man. It's technology. You can't control it. So,
Yeah, I don't think I'm going to. Yeah, I'm not going to go down the rabbit hole of a 3D printer. I've already. It's not because I don't think it's really cool. It is really, really cool. But for me, there are a couple rabbit holes I'm just not going to do because I've already got so much stuff that's piling up. If I do 3D printing, just not going to happen. Yeah, it's like
you know what?
I've already taken a couple.
And I understand that because, like the resin stuff, you get awesome results, right? I mean, you can get awesome results.
Yeah.
But if the print fails, you get that stuff, And it's not anybody's fault. It's not your fault. It's just something happens, and now you got a figure that's. I mean, this is pretty much. I'll fix this so it looks decent, but modeling skills, right? And then the PLA side, I mean, it works. I've gotten some pretty cool stuff that, I wouldn't have had if I didn't have a 3D printer.
Mm-hmm.
But
yeah,
one of the channels I was gonna save to you because he's out of Portland is Rick Lawler.
Okay. You have to send me a link.
He does a lot of the military stuff.
Oh, okay.
And he's uses nothing but AK stuff.
Oh yeah, AK makes him. I buy stuff direct. I love buying stuff from AK out of Spain. They've got stuff gets to Portland from Spain in 5 or 6 days, which is about 4 times faster than from Canada, for crying out loud, And they always throw in a few little freebies, they've always thrown in some free paint and some stuff like that. Yeah.
No, yeah. I mean, I try to, give people that are around the Oregon area, at least his channel, because he's a pretty cool guy. And he's all over Oregon. Like, he's lived in almost every part of the state, I think.
Well, would you send me a link or send me an email, because I don't have a pen with me and my memory's crappy. So send it
I
now.
understand.
Okay.
So we've hit that hour mark, right? Did you have any questions for me?
So what are you looking to get out of the hobby? What's important to you in terms of, I've seen what you've got on your channel. You do a lot of, what would I call it? I guess I'll call it lives. You do a lot of streaming stuff. What's important about the hobby for you?
So for me, it's time at this bench that I can just like unwind, because I've talked about it on the channel, but what brought me back to the hobby was what happened when my son was born, right? And I needed an outlet because, him being born under 2 pounds had a lot to do with the stress level I had at that time. So after about a year, I needed something to like veg out with that wasn't like TV or, something that was productive. And that's kind of where this started 8-9 years ago. And now I'm doing all this other stuff now.
Okay. And in terms of now you being in the hobby, what would you say what mountains are there any hobby mountains or building mountains that you still want to climb? What are your goals? Do you have goals in terms of things you want to build or things you want to do, or where you want to go in terms of what you produce or who
So there's 2 things that I really want to try. Clay sculpting, like sculpt a figure like however big, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I want to try that. And then I want to try to scratch build like a tank from like nothing. Like plastic bits, the plastic, the
plastic card. Yeah.
Stuff, I really, really want to try that, but it's, that's not something that you start today and it's done tomorrow, right?
Well, when you're doing your 3D printing now, are you basically going to places that are sending basically I'll call it the print, the design, and then you basically, whether it's free or you buy it, and then you basically print it out, or are you designing your own with software and then printing?
I haven't gotten into designing my own stuff yet.
Okay.
I mostly I've gotten a bunch of stuff from like GameBody.com. Xanax, I got a bunch of his files. But for the most part, I go on like Cult 3D, and like this guy was free on there. And it's a nice figure. I printed it out. It's going to be, and then I have other things like the Hawkman that I showed, I think a week and a half ago. That was on Cult 3D for free. It's just the bust and it looks totally cool. But other than that, I try to stick to like that, Thingiverse, My Mini Factory, Wicked. Wicked's been the new one. So yeah, I try not to spend money on the files, but sometimes you have to. And the cool part is some of the files, some of them are expensive, but some of them are like $1. Someone thought, I'll just put $1 in there, see how much money I make off of it, right?
One last question that I can think of. I don't know if you track this or not. Maybe you do. Maybe you don't. But in the event that you do, so how much time per week are you spending on the hobby? And I know it will vary week to week, but what would you say on average you spend on on the hobby?
Fridays, I can tell you Friday is probably the big chunk of this, but Friday's probably, I want to say at least 4 or 5 hours on Friday. And then
Okay.
throughout the week, it's like an hour here, an hour there, a couple hours maybe on a Sunday if, there's nothing else going on and I don't want to sit in front of the TV. But really, if I go over 10 hours in a week, it's really rare. Really rare.
What about, is that including time you might be spending looking at other people's channels?
Okay, well, I have a job to where I can set YouTube up and I'll be listening. I don't really watch. I can't watch, but I'll be listening to what you guys are saying through an 8-hour day every day.
Oh, okay.
And it's not all day, but like I'll have like 2-3 hours where I'm listening to you guys in the headphones. That's how I've been consuming YouTube lately. Yeah, but at home, if like I'm not doing a live thing, it's basically I'm just building.
Okay.
Yeah, it's crazy when you look at it as a small chunk of time. Sometimes it's really a bunch of time, and then other times it's like I didn't have near enough time out there this week. And you get both into that, spectrum,
Sure.
I guess. At least for
Sure.
me, anyway.
Sure.
Do you have any other questions for me?
Were you speaking to me? I don't have anything more at the moment.
Okay, so I'm gonna take you off screen and I'm gonna end this because we're well over an hour. But thank you for coming on. I'm glad we were able to make this work. And one of these weekends when you're in Oregon, we'll have to figure a way to meet up or something.
That shouldn't be too hard. And thanks for having me, Josh. I appreciate it. Thanks a lot.
Like I said, I will talk to you in a couple minutes offline. Okay?
All right.
Bye. All right, everybody. So that was Mark from Montana. Hopefully you guys learned just as much as I did. It's crazy when you start looking at some of the people that are just around you in the hobby. And I just happened to find Mark because of Fred Henry, because he promoted him one week during his shout outs. So I will see you guys next week. And if Rick Zink's still watching, I'm sending you an email today about next week. So be on the lookout for that. Bye, guys.